So welcome everybody to today's meeting. Today we would like to tell you or to talk to you about how to do cross-border reporting, how to do collaborative cross-border projects. And for that, our dear colleague Christian Varga is on board. I will also introduce him a bit later. He will do this session for you. And I will say in the beginning just a few things about today's meeting. So as I said before, the meeting is in English, but if you want to have the Russian translation, if it's easier for you, you can choose it via the globe in the bottom. And then maybe, which is also important for everybody or interesting for everybody who's in the project to know, we have finally found and confirmed a new project partner, which is IMI or IMI from Ukraine. So maybe some of you know Oksana Romanyuk, who is in this video chat with us today. And we are very happy that finally the number of partners is complete and that we have not only Publica as the project partner, but now also IMI on board. And in connection with that, there will be a little change in the project architecture. So instead of curating the information society strength that n-ost has been doing before, we will now be doing the climate section, and IMI, so Oksana, will be taking over the coordination of the information society publications. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And today we have also the last missing media partner on board, which is Zahid from Ukraine, and who are represented by Mariana Verbowska, who's also with us today. Very good to see you, and thank you for taking the time. I know you're in a very different time zone in the US, I think, so it must be rather early for you, but it's great that you could make it. Yes, as I said, Zahid is, so to say, the last missing partner, and they are the last missing Ukrainian partner, and they will be curating the climate publications in Ukraine. So we are very much looking forward to that as well. After this meeting, Annika will send you a document where you have the names of all partners and also their roles, which topic they curate in which country, and you will also have all contacts in that document. And we are also very happy that today with us are not, so to say, only the media and the project partners, but also some freelancers who are, if I'm not mistaken, from Armenia and from Georgia. So who took part in the calls that were issued by some of the media partners in Armenia and in Georgia. And if I'm informed correctly, then the Armenian journalists who join us today are Lilit, Gaidik, and Karina. This is what Suren told us. So very good to see you today, and I hope you enjoy the workshop. And there are also a few Georgian journalists, if I'm not wrong, but I'm not sure about their names. So maybe Lika or Tsira, you can give a short update. Let me just check if they are here. Or, okay, if nobody's here, maybe they will join at a later point. Well, what can I say? In any case, it's great that we have also people with us today who are not part of the usual list of media partners. So that is a careful but hopeful sign that the network which we intend to build with this project is growing. So it would be, yeah, it would be very, very great to have those people also at later stages of the project on board and to involve them in our future activities. And just very quickly to today's meeting. So the goal of this workshop is to prepare all of you for the first cross-border publication. So as you remember, the first set of publication, the first round, did not need to be in the cross-border format, but now with the second round of publications, we want to make things a bit more complicated and also a bit more interesting. And the cross-border format is this new feature, so to say, of this publication. But of course, if you have never done it before, or if it's been a long time, there you have probably more questions about it than answers. So this is why we asked our colleague Christian to conduct this little training today. I think from all the people working at n-ost, hardly anybody else is more experienced in cross-border publications than him, because he's the editorial coordinator for all cross-border publications at n-ost, and he will also maybe want to present himself a little bit and tell you what format and what content is expecting us today. So Christian, I will just give over to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Boris. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you again, and it's really nice to see so many people joining the seminar, and also seeing some of our partners that I already know. It's really nice to see you all, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today. Yeah, well, it may be experienced in some way as experienced one can be with a relatively new genre of journalism, but we will talk about it. Yeah, so I'm the editorial coordinator at n-ost. So I deal with cross-border collaborations, publications, but I'm not the only one, of course. We had several projects over the last years. Some were more in the realm of investigative journalism, some more maybe in some kind of social, cultural journalism, and so on. But today, as I understood from Boris and Anneke, there is a new mix of people here. I thought maybe we start a little bit from the scratch to get everyone on the same page. And yeah, I really would like this workshop to be hands-on, interactive, conversational. So Boris, you can maybe you can open the presentation already. So just in general, if you have any questions in between, just raise your hand or write it in the chat. We will try to react to it immediately or save it for later. And as I said, I would like to really, can you go to the, can you make it full screen, Boris, maybe? If not, yeah, nice, okay. Yeah, so I thought, can you go to the next? I would just say next, Boris, if it's okay for you to follow my orders. So just quickly about today's goals. Next. So what I would like to do today with you, maybe the first half of the session would be more conversational, interactive, reflecting. Why are we doing this again, so to say, yes. And also in the first part, Boris, please do the next. We would like to share a little bit of our experiences, because one very important topic for successful collaboration is always trust. And also talk about possible problems, challenges that might occur during a collaboration. And so this will be more the part where I hope that all of you are open to sharing and reflecting on your thoughts. And the more open we are, the better it is for all of us, I guess. Then in the third step, of course, we will have a short break, 5-minute break. And after the break, Boris, we are going to have just a tiny bit of theory. I don't want to bore you too much with that. There is a lot of theory on cross-border collaborative journalism, and there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and it's still evolving, but maybe it's a good idea just to have some basic concepts again, put them in our minds and see them. And also the last step would be to talk about some things, how you could prepare for the next phase of your collaboration. Obviously, these are many topics. Hey, that's too early. This is true. You spoiled it, man. Okay, never mind. So we have like approximately 1 hour, 20 minutes with a break. So this is just to get into some of the topics a little bit, and hopefully maybe we have another occasion, or you yourself are more aware of the different themes, so you can even talk about it later, or we can still keep in touch about it. All right, so the question before we dive into it, so you might ask, I would like to share with you why I am so motivated when it comes to cross-border collaboration. So what is it that motivates me personally? I could usually talk hours about this, or even days, but I just tried to do it in 3 short GIFs. So maybe now you can show the first one I found on the internet. Yes. So this is very much what I feel a lot of times when thinking about this topic, and also as a journalist. So it's basically, you know, today many topics and problems are very interconnected, and sometimes to use this metaphor, we all play with the same ball on the same playing field, but because we still operate mostly in national information and discourse bubbles. So that's my interpretation of this GIF, the bubbles. We often cannot really connect the dots and not get to the point where we can really see the whole picture, or shared problems, and also think about shared solutions, for example. So I don't know, the ball here could be the topic of climate change, of information societies you have also here, or it could be COVID, health, etc. I hope you get this metaphor. And my personal story, to be honest, when I started journalism about 10 years ago in Hungary, I was witnessing the early beginning of how Viktor Orban started to build down democracy, all this illiberalism, but nobody in the EU or Europe would really take it seriously. So sometimes you have this maybe situation as a journalist that you see something, you see a tide already building up somewhere, but the others cannot really understand it. They are underestimating it. So this was one of my crucial moments when I understood that it's such a problem that there are all these national bubbles, and it's not really connected. So the second GIF, Boris, because I think this kind of situation often leads to unreported stories, or to blind spots, so to say. Yeah. Let's say when COVID started, for example, maybe some of you are aware, there was a big discussion about migrant workers, and because they couldn't really move anymore and so on. And I actually took part in a project where we looked at this topic from very different country perspectives. But in no country there was a media reporting that would connect the dots of this topic that was simultaneously happening everywhere and was really interconnected. So even in Germany, which is quite a privileged media system with a lot of resources, there's not even this mindset and this capacity and this awareness that some stories are just, you can only see a very limited reality if you cannot connect them. And so a lot of stories remain untold, or they don't get the attention they deserve, because there's not really this competency in cross-border reporting and also in collaboration. It's kind of the very way that we think a lot of times of journalism is not really able, too fast. And so also the readers and the societies, they don't get the overall picture, just see a fragment of reality. And this is also often, leading to different political debates and decisions that are not really well informed. So in the next, this is not a GIF, but the visual. From my understanding, all over the world, there is a big movement now about collaborative cross-border journalism. So it's not something specific for any media, journalist, region, etc. But everyone is struggling with this challenge because many topics are either regionally or European or global, and we need much more of this collaborations to cover this accordingly. Otherwise, I think media journalism will get more and more irrelevant, structurally speaking, So from my point of view, we are just at the beginning of this paradigm change in journalism. And I think we're still at the very beginning. It depends on which industry, exactly which countries. But it's not only for cross-border journalism, also for collaborative journalism. So even if we think about local media collaborating with specific communities, for example. So everything that is connected to collaborate, getting out of your usual newsroom working ideas, but really collaborate with other media or communities. And I think the sooner we start experimenting with it, practicing it, the better for us. Yeah, because I think it will become more and more necessary and unavoidable in the future. All right. So that's from my part. And so that's also already starting the question, the next slide, Boris, if you could. So why are we doing this again? Probably all of you have different ideas and answers for that. And before I ask you to share them with us, I would just briefly show you some textbook definitions that answer this question on the next slide. So yes, next, that was correct. So there is a Center for Cooperative Media. They have this definition like collaborative journalism seeks to produce content that's greater than what any individual journalist, newsroom, or organization could produce on its own, right? And the second slide is also part of the definition. It aims to supplement each organization resources and maximize the impact of the content produced. Yeah, so I just thought we could start with this question, and I hope you got already some ideas from where we at n-ost are coming from when we're approaching this idea, and that's why I would like to ask you in the next step, in the next slide, Boris. That we open up a Jamboard now, and everyone can just write in anonymously answer maybe some of the questions. So what do you expect from this collaboration? What are your main goals as a journalist, as an organization, and what concrete results do you hope for? So I don't know if we share the link now, Boris, in the chat, or maybe
I can do that. Are you able to click on the screen, or?
No, it's just a presentation.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. 1 second.
You sent me the link before.
Yes. So you should be all able to open it without any login.
So I think we could just take 5 minutes to gather your answers, and don't need to be super sophisticated. Just go with your first impulses, or if you have more sophisticated ideas already, very concrete answers. Also, everything is possible.
Funny, I can open it, but I cannot write in it. I don't know if someone else has similar issue.
Oh.
Maybe Boris, you can showcase how to do it.
Yes.
You just have to click on this.
Yeah, I think if you click on the pen on the left, you should be able to write.
Or just on this note thing. Yeah, so you get this yellow paper.
You can also right-click on the note and then you make a copy of the note, and then you can put your text there. That's easier.
Okay, thank you.
It seems people having troubles right now because maybe you can show it on the screen, Boris, how to do it on your screen.
Yes.
Okay.
I will do
Ah,
so.
now it seems to get into moving. Take your time.
So yes, in this column on the left, the fourth logo is the note. And if you click on it, you can create a new text.
Okay, get new ideas, new insights, connect with journalists in other countries. Sustainable structures, interesting stories. Okay, does anyone need more time, or maybe we have 1 more minute?
Okay. I'm trying to order them a little bit.
We are all interested in viral content. Yeah, probably that's most probably true. Okay, thank you guys. I think just we could stop here. You can still go back to this Jamboard, I think, Boris, right? And write even more things there. But it's
Yes.
really cool to see. Maybe someone I will now obviously pick the people that I already know. Sorry about that. Can tell us shortly what you wrote in. Christina, maybe from Armenia, from HED. Does it work?
You need to unmute yourself, Christina.
Oh, sorry. Hello.
Hi.
I wrote that I'm waiting for new and interesting collaborative topics to cover.
So new topics. Okay.
Border
Topics.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, HED already has experience with this kind of investigative cross-border topics, but maybe I pick Lika, although I don't know if she's listening right now. Or Lika, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, What did you write, or what do you expect from?
I read everything which already was written by our colleagues, and yes, new ideas is the same. What I can mention.
Okay, so is there anyone who would like to add something to this right now, here in the talk? Just raise your hand. No. All right, great. Thank you, guys. It was already very interesting. I think we see that you all share specific expectations, finding new stories, connecting, scale your stories, cross-border, learning from other partners, share information. So basically, if we go back to the presentation, Boris, please, it's all around these lines, right? That by collaborating, there is some added value in very different dimensions from which you can profit as a journalist, but also as a media and your audiences. All right. Okay, so then let's go to the next part, because the next part is this trust part. All right. So it's a very important topic. Build trust and anticipate possible problems is the goal. It's not something that we can just do by this, but before I would like to ask you to share some of your maybe even concerns and experiences. I also would like to start with sharing my or our experience at n-ost. So basically, when it comes to trust, I think one of the very most important, if not the most important aspect of every collaboration is communication. It sounds not surprising, yeah, but it is again and again showing in each project that it is the main cause of either problems, misunderstandings, or of great fun, success, and so, yes, everything, and also sometimes the bridge between the both. So if you have a problem, how to communicate so that it's not a problem anymore. And before I would like to share, I mean, this is really important, that it's strange, you know, we are here, a lot of people, they don't know each other. Some of you know each other, you're in different countries and so on. There is this big project. You communicate online, you never really meet in person, or sometimes, but so it's just really important to be aware that this is not the usual communication situation that you have if you work in your usual environment, right, with your colleagues that you already know, within your framework and so on. So it's really important to be aware of this, that this is special. Maybe there is another way of communication needed, or it's really important part to think about communication. Communication is very broad, but and before I ask you to share some of your positive and negative experiences in former collaborations, if you had any. If not, you can also think about your journalism job. I would like to share with you some of mine first. So just a very concrete example. Maybe the next slide, Boris. Yeah. So what is this? As a coordinating editor, I, for example, we did a newsletter over the last 2 years, and I edited the text of over 50 journalists from over 30 countries in Europe, okay? And it was a little bit fast-paced production, and we worked with Google Doc, and we had special formats for the newsletter. And so, you know, people had to write their texts, and I had to edit them, right? And I have this whole kaleidoscope of different journalists from different countries reacting to editing in general. This is not a problem because every one of you is editing or is getting edited, but it's different if somebody is editing you or you are editing someone who you haven't really worked with before, and it's maybe a special content, and everything is new. So you don't have this, you maybe never met before, you maybe just talked for 1 hour before, I don't know, etc., etc. So it's just a very different framing of this editing, right? So some journalists, they are totally fine, they are super easy, they're like, okay, you made some suggestions and so on, and the communication goes very well. They bring in a lot of credit, everyone is aware that this is a special situation. But just to tell you one example, I don't want to name drop anything, but for example, that's why I made this text. There was one text that arrived from a great journalist, and but I just used the usual GDoc thing. I cut some of a text out like this, right? And made some comments about it, suggestions, and so on. And then she was calling me like super excited and a little bit angry, and she was like, "What is this? All my texts, they're just lines. I cannot see anything anymore. What did you do? Yeah, it's and so on." And I just had to explain to her, "Hey, this is, first of all, this is just suggestion. This is how it works. This is you know, it's just a constructive suggestion and so on." And after we talked it out, she was much more okay with it. But again, there are very different journalists, different editing cultures, different cultures of how to talk about editing texts, for example, right? So it's getting harder or a little bit more challenging if you do it not in your familiar space, but inside the collaboration. So it's just, again, communication is super important. But at the end, we solved the problem. And another example, you know, it's not always going well. Sometimes it can also fail. Once we applied for a project with different partners, and it seemed that especially with one partner, there were just maybe even external circumstances that didn't allow us to really communicate during the process. And at some point, when it was really important that we would agree on stuff, a big conflict broke out. A conflict that could have been avoided. It was not intended by anyone, but it was just because we were not we were not so aware of the communication, right? And we would have to communicate it better much earlier in the process, and so on. And also, I don't know what's the next slide is right now from top of my head, Boris. Oh, yeah. So there are some. Now I'm focusing on the problems. Okay, we will also focusing on the positive sides, but it's just important, you know, to once talk about this. So what are some questions that might have, you know, we need to clear when it comes to trust? So maybe you ask yourself, will the others bring in as much work and commitment? Do we really gain something? Is it a fair win-win? What happens if I'm not really satisfied with the partner's work, or if we can't agree on something, right? How can we discuss and solve the problems? And the next slide. So there is always this question, is there enough trust and also goodwill for constructive criticism? Do we give each other enough benefit of the doubt? Yeah, so maybe more credit than we would give each other with our normal colleagues. Are there different journalism traditions, newsroom cultures, editing styles? And this is maybe a more special point at the end, that sometimes you are here now, but sometimes some of you maybe are not, more isolated. Your media thinks, okay, she is in this project, whatever, but a lot of times it's also a problem that occurs if the collaboration is not communicated well enough in your own media and organization. So much about the problems, and we will talk about solutions soon, but to give you the opportunity in this project that is taking such a long time, and it's just That's why we would like to go to the next slide for it and make a breakout session now. And I would like to ask you to answer 2 questions to the others. So share one positive experience of a previous cross-border collaboration. And if you haven't been in a cross-border collaboration before, then you could just share, I don't know, a positive experience from your journalistic work when it came to some kind of collaboration, be it your relationship with your editor or I don't know. And maybe one negative experience of a previous cross-border collaboration. Please also think of one negative experience. And also maybe how did you were able to solve it? Did you solve it? Did you not solve it? Did you learn anything from it? What would you do differently next time? Okay, so we will have 10 minutes for this now. And I'm really curious to hear from you after that, what you found out.
Okay, I will quickly assign the breakout rooms. I will do my best to mix you as well as possible.
And maybe in the meantime, you could also ask each other, what are you afraid of? What could happen, right? How can we make sure that doesn't happen?
Do you want to be part of a breakout room, Christian? Maybe Anneke? But I think you're a co-host, so you can actually even join yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it already working, the breakout? No,
Not yet. So we 10 minutes, right? You said. Okay,
yes.
Then we do. Now it should work. So I sent the questions once again to each breakout room.
Is this already a breakout room?
No,
Okay.
you, Anneke, and the 2 translators should be here with me.
But I
I
will
think
also
Anneke
go.
joined on her own. Okay, just join any room.
Oder soll ich lieber nicht?
Nein, warum nicht? Ich mache das auch.
Kann ich auch springen?
Du kannst auch springen, ja. Du bist ja Co-Host, ne? Also du müsstest.
Ah, ich habe es noch nie gemacht. Warte. Also dieses Springen.
Geht das oder sonst kann ich dich zuweisen?
Warte kurz. Breakout Sessions. Ah ja. Ich gucke mal kurz, wo ich reingehe. Ich gehe mal bei Lika rein. Bei Room 2. Da muss ich auf Room 2, ne? Und dann. Nee, wie war das nochmal?
Ja.
Wie geht das?
Ich schicke dich mal zu Lika. Moment.
Ja.
Jetzt.
Danke. Hi again. Oksana, I'm sorry, I missed the last thing that you were saying. Okay. I hope it was 10 minutes, not really a lot of time, but I don't know, in my breakout room, it seemed that everyone was super positive about the most experiences they had so far. It was mentioned as maybe as one problem that occurred, that at some point there was a deadline, but one of the journalists didn't answer for 3 days. It was all by email and it was not clear and it caused a lot of stress. So I think this is one of the classical examples that you know, probably will occur from time to time, and that you can make sure to communicate about how do we communicate exactly, and what do we expect from each other regarding deadlines, because as we all know, if that doesn't work, then it causes a lot of stress for others. Maybe you can, I don't know, I wasn't in all the breakout sessions, maybe someone can tell about another interesting example of a problem that occurred and maybe a solution. I don't know.
Well, the problem from my experience, it's always if it's first time cooperation, and sometimes during the idea development, some people give or exaggerate a little bit, and then this exaggeration, if it doesn't prove true, for example, someone thought that they have contacts to XYZ, but then during the story research, it turned out that those contacts are not relevant anymore, and then we don't have the leads or heroes we expected, and then it might cause a little bit, actually a lot of stress and maybe story review, or so this is always it's just good to share information as it is, and if something goes wrong, not to wait, but to say immediately that maybe let's revise our story concept or something like this.
Thank you, Alina. That's definitely a very good point. Realistically, talking about stuff, you don't need to over exaggerate, and also makes it much easier if some things don't work out the way it was planned, if it was transparent from the beginning. Any others? Did you hear anything interesting?
Well, in my breakout room, Zira pointed out to the importance of a good topic, and of that the topic must be really a topic of common interest, and a topic that's relevant for all of the media participating. And then it's and it works the better the more people already know about this topic.
Yeah, and first of all, I would like to add that I would like to hear from you. What do you think makes good transborder story? Because it's not always easy to find that kind of a story that connects two countries. We share the borders, and we share also other things, because we communicate, we trade, we go from one country to another. So on the one hand, it seems easier to find a good transporter story, but on the other hand, it may not be, because at some point it may be actual, and it may be happening as a matter of fact, but it may end. So I think that the appeal, the continuity, and also I don't know, something that is happening at the moment, for example, COVID-19. Do we have something in common with Armenia that we exchange? Could it be like vaccines, or I don't know, treatments? It's not likely, but it's like the example. In terms of climate change, for example, Christina and me have talked about the common border that we have. There is a forest, and there is the logging on the forest. So do you think that it's interesting cross-border story, or what do you suggest that we could think about in the future? yeah, we have some ideas at the moment, but if you suggest some like something that you have heard from old like topics or old projects that could be continued, or you have heard and maybe it's real, we could make further research and yeah.
Thank you so much for these great questions, because it's definitely the next topic after the break. And then we have much more time to go into this. What kind of cross-border stories are there in general, a little bit of theory, and then I mean, there is no one fit size answer for all, one fit, one size. And obviously the first thing you need to listen to is yourself. You know the best if the story is interesting and how you could maybe do it in a way, but that's exactly the next slide and the next chapter of today's workshop. And I would just say thank you for participating so far. I hope it was already interesting, and we could just meet again in 5 minutes in 5 minutes in different time zones. Okay. Right.
No.
If you're back, please turn your camera on so we can see each other and we know that you're back. Okay, so again, if you're back, please turn your camera on so that we know that you're back. And I think, Boris, could you go back to the presentation, please?
Of course.
I just realized that it was a little bit of fake news, not fake news, but there is still a little small part before we come to the story question. And I think we could just do it quickly because it's not so, it's a little bit more theoretical. I just wanted you to see it once.
The next slide.
Oh yeah, this is okay. Maybe just to sum it up. Yeah, sorry. Maybe one before. One before. Sorry. No. When we the one with the trust. Back.
Sorry, I.
Rückwärts. Yeah. So yeah.
Here we are.
Next one. Let's see. Let's next. Oh yeah, I just wrote some points down. Yeah, no, please stay. So again, so one point, communicate the goal of the partnership throughout your organization. It's always sometimes forgotten. In general, try to network and get to know each other, hold regular meetings or just have a short call or something. And maybe not 100% time only communicate about work. Leave a few percent for other topics maybe. And as Olena pointed out already and others, anticipate and address possible problems directly, constructively, and set the proper expectations, right? And also what everyone brings in, and if there are some rules like deadlines or whatsoever. Yeah, and the next slide. I just wanted to say, don't forget, praise each other for good work and celebrate success, hashtag good vibes. It's probably you do it initial anyways, but I just want to share some of our Slack messages. And one of the projects I worked with, each time we had a collaboration, it was a newsletter every week, new team of people. But this is really nice just to thank each other when we are satisfied, and you know, it's not something you should do because you're obliged to, but sometimes you don't have time and you forget it or so, you know. So it's just especially in this kind of communication circumstances, we talk so much about problems, but they rarely occur, and most of the time things are positive and great, but then also it's nice to talk about it, at least at the end of a successful milestone or a publication or so. Yeah, so next please. Break we already had. And so just some concepts really quickly. I don't want to make it too dry, just it's a little bit meta. The next slide. As I understand, this project is also going through different phases, okay? So just wanted to give you the idea that there are different kinds of collaborations, of course. But in general, there are two different kinds. There are temporary kinds and ongoing kinds. So temporary, like maybe just one collaboration on one article and then never again or so. And the ongoing kind is, I think, much more that we have with the in-depth project over a few years and with different degrees. And there is also something like more separate collaborations, co-creating collaborations, and very much integrated collaborations. So separate collaborations could be just there is an exchange between different experts from media or other people, but the publication is entirely in the responsibility of each partner, and everyone does what they want to do with it. And the other one, the co-creating, is more like, okay, for example, different partners bring different analysis content into the publications that everyone uses, right? Can be text, can be video, can be data, different skills, different content. And the other one is a very integrated collaboration where really from the very beginning to the last publication step, there is a high integration in the research, in the writing process or the content creation and so on. As I understood it, probably this project is going through all of the stages at some point or another. I just thought it's interesting to see this maybe again, and to make clear, okay, what are we doing at the moment? Yeah, what kind of collaboration is it at the moment? Okay, and the next one is also very theoretical. So again, it's basically the same. It's a little bit, so there's this level of integration and the duration and the commitment. So if the integration is low and the duration is small, the commitment doesn't need to be so, you know, it's some maybe a one-time collaboration, needs a few days or so, but the higher the integration, the longer the duration, the commitment also rises. And yeah, I think it's a growing process. I just wanted to see this once and maybe to save it somewhere in your brains. Okay, next, please. Yeah, so how should we do this? We come now more to the questions already asked about the stories, but also Lika, for example, sent some questions before the workshop about how to organize a team. Again, I would start more abstract. It's always good to get a little bit conceptual picture, I think. So on the next slide, we see this model by Brigitte Alfter, who is one of the main inventors of cross-border journalism. And this is basically this 7 steps of a cross-border collaboration. Again, these are just concepts. They are not laws or natural laws or anything, but sometimes it helps to keep them a little bit in mind, and you can adjust them or so. But basically, what she's saying that let's start with the networking. That's what we are already doing. Then you have some ideas. Then you need to build up the team around it. You have to agree on some kind of research plan. Then you have to actually do the research, and you have to publish it, and then you can again reflect, share what you could do next time, and obviously you share the publication as well. And then it starts all over again. But this is kind of, I think, quite intuitive. But these are good steps to follow a little bit, right? When you're thinking of how to organize your next publication within this project. Okay. Any questions about this before we go? No. You can always raise your hands or put it in the chat. So what I'm showing you now is one approach to think about different types of cross-border stories, which actually I just copy and pasted from one of our projects that we had. We had some cross-border project for many years with mostly freelance journalists. And after the project ended, we asked them to make something like a cross-border playbook. I will show it to you in a second. There is a website, and they did a lot of workshops, and they tried to come up with some kind of orientation. And this is one, there are different approaches about talking about stories. So they said there are like 5 different stories. Again, these are not any natural laws, but it's helpful, hopefully. So the all-important story is basically maybe the simplest type of cross-border story. It's like there is a big international problem that is affecting everyone in some way or another, and it has broad implications and consequences in individual countries. For example, they said tracking the budget of the Euro 2020, okay, in different countries. There were 10 countries involved. Or comparing the rise of far-right movements across Europe. So there is one big topic, but it affects and has different stories in different countries. So this is one of the aspects, that one of the story types. And there is the international threat story, which is a little bit more complex. There is maybe identifies more of a complex problem, try to tracing its roots and international effects. So an example they worked on back then was, there was a Russian oligarch. He created this financial empire using Malta as a tax haven, while earning profits from companies specialized in short-term but high-cost loans, and granted to Europe's most vulnerable citizens, how they called it. And it's a very complex story, but they tried to make it's a very complicated business scheme, and there is a risk of losing the audience while explaining the story, but they tried to start to follow the money, and they found a Romanian client who was like the victim of the scheme. And from that, they built up the stories over Malta, Russia, and so on. But this kind of story is quite complex. It needs different set of skills. And all this is more in the realm of really investigative journalism, classical investigative journalism. There are also other things. The third one, I think, is always a good story type to start with, because usually you will get ideas soon. Basically, the problem solution story, right? One country has a problem that another country maybe has already solved or already has some possible solutions to, and you can compare the both strategies and have some conclusions. And normally you should focus on one country, and the other country or the other countries serve as other examples of possible solutions, outcomes, if their set of policies would be applied in your country, for example, right? It's just important here that to keep the parallel reasonable, but I think in our case, it's not so much of a problem, but I don't know, you shouldn't necessarily, I don't know, compare Georgia with Brazil or so, because there might be a lot of different circumstances and cultural, political gaps that doesn't make their solution necessarily representative. But in our case, because this is a regional collaboration, I think this could be a very good, always a very good idea. And there is something called connecting the dots story. It's again a little bit more complicated. These are stories that are maybe broad topic in various countries, a little bit similar to the all-important stories, but they do not just show different answers to the same questions, but illustrate like relevant connections between countries. Yeah, and the last one is thematic stories. So it doesn't need to be necessarily investigative journalism. It can be cultural things. It can be sociological or also related to the topics of this project, where you have a topic and you try to observe different phenomena on it from different countries and tell the story about this topic and how it affects the different countries or how different countries react to it. So this is one approach. Next slide. There's another definition that you could use. So there are stories of general interest, right? So you're looking at the cross-border implications of current events, okay? And there are organization stories, for example, related to WTO, NATO, or EU. There's the new legislation coming or decision that is relevant to maybe all countries involved in the project or something like that. And there are chain stories, so to say. Again, this is very investigative when it comes to supply chain of transnational crime, follow the different steps of the scheme of a story or something. Yes, thank you. Next slide, I think. Again, I wanted to show you this before we ask questions. This is, maybe you can click on it, Boris, for a moment, the link. If it works.
I don't think you can see it. I need to share the other window.
Okay, sorry, wasn't thinking of that.
1 second.
I really just want to encourage you to have a look at this playbook, because it was made by practitioners, all the alumni of our project. They created this playbook together. It's more on the perspective of freelance journalists or so, but still, yeah, and it's also quite interactive. And because today we just can scratch on some of the topics, but I really, it's not, I'm not saying it because it's from n-ost. I think it's really a great toolkit. So you could have a look at it. Thanks, Boris, for sharing. And there are for each of the stories that I just told you, there are several examples for each story, concrete stories, and the links and interviews with some of the journalists who took part in the collaboration, and so on and so on and so on. So if you're going back to the slide, the next slide, because Lika asked me to also show some examples from the region. And again, sorry, Boris, I need you to click on the link. This was one of our first experiments, with not so much like crime investigative journalism, but trying to think about how can different media profit from collaboration in different countries. So there were media from Poland and Moldova and Hungary and Czech Republic. And we met once in Warsaw before COVID. And you know, the nice thing about this is if you put 5 journalists into one room for one day and ask them, okay, what stories are there in our countries, and are there any connections, and so on. And we really just had one day, but we came up with a lot of stories. But yeah, thanks, Boris. And and we had a different, we experimented with different formats. So there was one of the ones that was a problem solution journalism. So let's say in Hungary and in Moldova, wine is a big economical factor, and they had to deal with specific global problems in the wine market, but both were local media. And so they kind of made a story about how it affects the local winery economically, but also it was really locally produced. And then the Moldovans told the Hungarians what the Moldovans are doing, the Hungarians told the Moldovans what the Hungarians are doing. So it was flowing inside the text. The text was not the same, but each brought something from their own country which the others could use, and vice versa. It's just one example. There were many others. If you scroll down a little bit, as you see, there we had so-called twin text. We tried to. That's when they worked on the same text with 2 or 3 journalists. So again, we're going back to this concept of how, you know, like how integrated the collaboration is. And it was published in the different media, but this was really working on the text together much more also. And the last one, I think, this brings me back to the viral wish. We also tried to do something, I don't know, holistical format. We realized that in all of the countries, somehow the topic of the old communist buildings where people live is still recent. So it's a different, maybe you can click on one of it, Boris. It's just an example. And we collected 7 examples from different countries and with explanations how this topic is discussed. Are people, do they still want to live in them, and so on. And you could see this is a classical listicle. If you scroll down a little bit fast. This is in Czech Republic. This is in Ekaterinburg in Russia. This is in Prague. So, and that's also interesting because you really feel you have the same, there is some kind of same heritage regarding this, and there are different stories to tell about what is going on with that now, and sometimes different problems, different solutions as well. This is in Hungary. So yeah, there is a broad range of things how to approach. Basically, you can use all the other formats that you use usually and think of, okay, how can we adapt? But there are no rules. You can also try to experiment. And if you want to have some more nice viral thing that is not clickbait because it's basically a serious topic, but you can produce it in a nice way, which maybe gains more attention, it's also possible. Why not? Then I think, especially when it comes to virality, the more countries are involved and the more you find a topic that really affects everyone, all readers, the more readers you will also get cross-border. Okay, so this is just one example from the region. Another example which was interesting for mine is also this question of remembrance, right? With the post-communist legacy, there was a problem solution article about all the old monuments. You know, everyone knows what I'm talking about here, but I don't know if you know how the other countries next to you dealt with the same problem. You know, I think there are many different approaches. So yeah, this is one of the projects, and I don't know, I hope it's a little bit inspiring. And back to the presentation first. So the next one. Maybe this is the last one to show you. It's a little bit repeating, but this is actually the newsletter projects that I worked in a lot over the last 2 years. If it's okay, Boris, can you show it once again? Sorry. So
no problem.
It's just one example of a very integrated, in some ways integrated production, because the idea here is that we do a newsletter every week with different people, different journalists, and we decide together on the topic from the very beginning. And we not only say, okay, everyone writes a text, but we really think together about how do the different texts relate to each other so that it's interesting for the reader. So in this case, it was almost a year ago. We talked already about NATO topic on Europe's eastern borders. Just a little bit down to the first pictures. As you can see, we have five. No. We have 5 authors here. One from Finland, one from Estonia, one from Ukraine, one from Serbia, one from Georgia, and so it's this is more of an example of a very recent. It was a very recent thing. It happens in 1 week, but in theory you could also be quick if you have a plan already, right? And then we managed to everyone, and I know for most of you this topic was maybe always on the agenda, but let's say a little bit westwards of the continent, not so much. Plus, even the journalists who take part in here, the Georgian, didn't really know about the Finnish discourse in the detail, and vice versa, and so on. And we tried to put together a picture, because it's the same topic, and then something. If you add the individual pieces, the final picture you get is much more than just individual pieces. So if you scroll down just to see it a little bit, so there are different formats. We started with Finland. We had commentary, we have analysis, we have some number of the week format, statistics, and as I said, maybe it's worth to read it again, this one. But we had, it's not only about actual political topics, it's not only about crisis topics or so. We made a lot of different topics. For example, we made topics, kannst du kurz auf die Landing Page gehen, Boris? Bitte, ganz oben. And just to give you a few examples.
Sorry, I think there is a question from Sira. Maybe you want to take it now.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for the interesting stories. But as we know, it takes a lot of time to gather all the data for this kind of stories. And do you think, how do you think you integrate it with the current news that is going on? Sometimes it's not easy to attract attention to a story like, for example, Soviet past. NATO could be more interesting, but anyway, also it would be interesting to share the strategy, how to communicate these kind of stories with the news, like TV, online, or anything, to get at as much readers or viewers or listeners as possible.
I mean, first of all, I would say that, the more recent, the faster you want to be and to react on current things, the more difficult it is. Yeah. So ideally, you have already had some other collaborations before that are more slow, right? Long-term investigations or mid-term investigation, because for this, we worked out a very clear editorial rhythm. There are a lot of things that you can just adjust to, but this fast-paced thing is more something that you probably, it's super interesting. If you, you can definitely get our template for the project if you would like to use it. About reach, I think it's as I said, you can sometimes do this viral content. In this case also, if you have 5 journalists from different countries and they share it on their own, but they may be even able to tell their media about it and maybe to integrate it somehow, then it gets more cross-border audience much more automatically if you would just do it by your own, right? And try to put it together. So it's kind of in the DNA of the integrated production that ideally it gets more audience. But I think in general, I don't know the reach of your media and so on. I can tell it's hard to get traditional media to convince to do this, but maybe you have partnerships with them and try to, and maybe that if they see the value, the journalistic value of your story, they hopefully should be interested in picking it up. Or I don't know, it's hard to tell it in a general way. I hope you understand, but or maybe I didn't even get the end question right, or did I answer
No, I
something?
mean, yeah, I got it right, I think. But for example, were you able to get to any like big and good German media like Deutsche Welle, for example, which covers also some in-depth or Eastern Europe kind of thing? Is it possible to get their attention for an interesting content if it's in English, for example? Or other international media, like, I don't know, anyone?
I mean, I think I don't know. I cannot tell you about the interests of your organization, but I think the first thing is that it's always first step is to think about your own readers and the own media that you have, right? So how do you make it interesting for them? Maybe it's something new. It's a little bit different. The stories. Why should they care about what's happening in another country and so on? Maybe also you can explain to them to make the collaboration part of the story itself, right? The basic idea, maybe through reportage elements and so on. I mean, I don't know if do you plan to publish the stories in English as well, or English only, or what? Where is the question aiming at?
Why not? Because, for example, Christina and me are going to make cross-border stories on climate change. So if it is interesting, like it could interest, I don't know, could it interest any international media? That's my question, actually, because there are like international, there are like popular and big media that are interested in climate stories, for example, if they are interesting. For example, I have seen a climate change story from Russia on the New York Times, and I have read them. I mean, I have scrutinized what are the details, why are they interesting for international media like that. So I'm thinking from that point of view. First of all, of course, we'll write in our languages, in Georgian and in Armenian, but why not think about it further for foreign audiences as well, like as the ones that I mentioned. For example, there was a story on Deutsche Welle. Deutsche Welle has representatives here in Georgia, and they have made a medical story about Georgia, so they know about Georgia. And if we produce good story, maybe we could pitch it to them. If you have like some connections with the editors, and maybe you could suggest, or we could further collaborate on what kind of ideas that could be interested for them. Yeah, so it's like we have like many developments, and why not, if we work a lot on the topic, why not use this opportunity to to expand our stories as fast and as far as possible.
Sure. I think I just can partly answer because I think Boris and Anneke are noting this down right now as we are speaking. And I also know that Boris, with another project in Central Asia, after the publications were made there, we tried to get them republished in German media and international media. I don't know if they were designed from the beginning in a way that they would, I think it makes a difference. That's what I mean. I think I don't know exactly the profile of what you decided in depth, but I rather, from my perspective, and what I see, the first step is to really think about it as something that you start with your own audience in media first, to integrate this method as a chance of better informed journalism on specific topics. And the next question, if it's topics that need international awareness, obviously it's good if you have strategies of who to reach out to and so on. And I'm sure Boris and Anneke will think about it. And it's also something that n-ost likes to do, and if we can. But just for example, this newsletter, it was a niche newsletter. It was a lot of editors, journalists all across Europe would read it, right? But not so much readers, because we didn't make a lot of PR for it and so on. But we pitched it together with other media now, with much larger media. And hopefully we will get the project done. And that I was, when talking to open-minded media and journalists who are already open to this idea, it's much easier, but especially this privileged, big, large Western media, they are a little bit traditional and not so open. So we really that's what I tried to hook them, like, okay, this is not something that you just do for fun or la pour la, just for the sake of it. It is something that makes your journalism better, informs your readers much better. You get a lot of content, you get a lot of information. Everyone brings in, but gets 10 times more of it, because everyone brings in 1, but if it's 10, then you get 9, right? So, and it was my strategy to think about how to reach a lot of people and how to convince media with already large reach. Yeah, so it's a complex. There is no real answer, but I think it's a great idea to try to choose specific publications out of the project and try to pitch it for or even to connect some international media to the project in the long term, maybe let them know that it exists. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I said maybe if you have a connection with at least the German media like TV, as I said, then maybe we could start of what they like. Are they interested in climate stories? I'm sure they are. So then the question is what kind of angle we could take, because there are different angles that we could take. In Georgia, for example, there are finances, there are biodiversity, there is many things. So I think I would like to think like that. What they like, of course, something that's unusual, that is happening in that part of the world. Yeah, so if you have some extra connections, I will be happy to share and then to consider it before taking any angle of a certain story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, in the cross-border sense, you could think about stories that are connected to, for example, Germany, right? In Georgia, and not necessarily, but sometimes they are, or whatever media you want to reach out. But if it's a global topic or if it's a regional connecting topic, then you already there are at least some media I know of that would already be probably interested in carrying it out also to more international audience. Okay, so yeah, we took some time with this topic slides. I just wanted to give you a short overview about what different possibilities are there in the short time we had. I'm not even sure if there are any more slides. Boris, can you have a look? And it was a little bit more frontal than I hoped for, but I hope you liked it anyways, especially the first part. If we still have a few minutes, I just hope that somehow this workshop would help to formulate something like, again, a shared vision of what you're going to do, or at least awareness of it, and motivates you, or maybe you know now what still needs to be done, and you can give feedback to Anneke or Boris about it, communicate. Yeah, so basically that's it from my side, and if we want, we can still continue a little bit with open questions and discussions. Is someone talking? Do you feel like there was something that you didn't really get answered today? Maybe you can also send us your questions if you have more follow-up questions. Yeah. Are you more motivated now also about the project than before or less? Did you learn something? Let me know if you want. And I don't know if there are any other reflections you just want to share right now.
I have a question, if I may. Christian, thank you very much, but I don't know, maybe it's more to Annika and Boris, because I convinced our editor-in-chief Eugenia to join us today, because we're going to discuss the like actually workflow and process of working in teams on cross-border stories. So I was wondering if how you're going to divide us like by topics, and what a little bit, if you could elaborate a little bit more on this on the next call.
Maybe Annika, you want to answer, because I think you anyway were planning to close the session with the next steps forward about that.
Yeah, well, actually, the procedure will be as usual. We will meet again in the topical juries, and the timeline for these juries, they are a little bit different, because we have 2 publications on climate change this year, but only 1 publication on health and on information society. So we will invite you to join the next meeting for your topical jury, and there we will discuss all the questions we already discussed today, which topics may be suitable for a cross-border publication, what's interesting, which aims do we have. I mean, Zira already formulated very well what's her ambition with the next publication, so maybe there are other ambitions in this or another kind. So we will just meet in the topical meeting, in the topical juries. And yeah, I think the climate jury is already active. I don't know, but we will very soon send you an email regarding the Information Society jury and the health group. Yeah. So all of
I
you,
will
if
send
you
to the climate media. Yeah, I will send to the climate media partners a time to meet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's very important that maybe you can, all of you can already think about possible topics. Yeah, so that when we meet, we really have something to discuss about. You remember maybe the country dossiers that all of you prepared for the project. So I will have a look again, or I can resend them again if you need it. So we can already have a look whether there are some topics that are relevant to all of your countries. But otherwise, you are really invited and requested to think about possible topics for the next publication that can really be treated or produced in a cross-border collaborative way, and that are interesting for all of your audiences.
Also, sorry, one more question. If, for example, our journalists identify a topic that is not medicine, but like, I don't know, climate change, is there a possibility to switch to themes, or shall we work on health only?
Well, actually, the idea was that you will stick to your topic throughout the project. But I mean, if you, yeah, actually, that's the basic idea, because the raison behind the whole project is that you develop a specific profile with your specific topic. And so therefore you should produce 3 publications on this topic.
Thank you, Annika.
Diana, I think you wanted to ask something. We can't hear you because you're muted.
We still cannot hear you.
No?
Why? Now?
Now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. So I would like to ask you to share before the next jury meeting, to share all dossier, country dossier of the
of climate change topics. So we will get acquainted before the meeting to the topics and problems that exist in our countries. While we were we have discussed with Georgian colleague some ideas, but before that, maybe we will find some topic which could be interesting not only for two countries, but more than two countries. So please share it with us.
Yeah, I will send you all the dossiers once again.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, are there any other questions? If this is not the case, then I'd say we do not need to spend more time on this or this afternoon in Germany this afternoon. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much, Christian, for presenting. And
thank you for having me and listening. I hope it was good.
Yeah, and then see you very soon in the jury meetings and via email. Whenever you have a question, please don't hesitate to send an email. I will try to answer as quick as possible.
Okay.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice evening.
Քիզ, եթե կուզես կարամ Լենինգրադյանով քշեմ, մեր երեխուն վերջինս գնանք։ Եթե ուզում ես մամայից մտնես, մնաս մի քիչ, ուրիշ արդ։ Հա, օքեյ լավ։
Oh, we can't hear you.
No, we still can't hear you.
Isn't it because of the channels? Oder muss man nicht da unten
Yeah,
was
I guess
umstellen?
it's- No, yeah, now in the English channel I hear you. Yes. That's it, and of course, and yeah, we'll be happy to contact you again. I'll send you all the documents and the invoice as soon as possible. Yeah. Bye-bye. So. Ich habe eine Menge gelernt über Cross-Border.
Weiß nicht, ich war ein bisschen, ja, es ist einfach